Welcome to an intimate conversation with women of color. This podcast provides women of color, LGBTQ, and allies a platform to use their voices. Join us as we share our personal journeys. I am your host, Deneen L. Garrett. Hello, an intimate conversation with women of color listeners. Thank you once again for joining me for another week, another intimate conversation. I'm looking forward to today's guest, who is one of my three favorite podcasters. I am so looking forward to the conversation, to you all learning more about Simone E. Morris and just coming along with her journey. So sit back and get ready for today's episode. Simone, hi, and welcome to an intimate conversation with women of color. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much, Deneen, for having me.
You are so welcome. So I want to introduce you to our listeners. So today's guest is Simone E. Morris. She is the CEO of Simone Morris Enterprises, LLC. And we met virtually, Simone, or was first introduced to her through one of my favorite podcasters, and that is Amanda Hartz. Simone was also on my one of my others. I have three favorites, Simone being one, also on Stephen A. Hart's podcast. And so that's how I was first introduced to you, Simone, and your podcast, The Power of Owning Your Career. Tell us a little bit more about you.
Awesome. Well, I come from a corporate background. I spent about 23 years in corporate America, primarily with a information technology background, and switched over to human resources, specifically diversity and inclusion, and then went out on my own back in 2015. So my business is really focused on two lanes. One lane is empowering women to be in the driver's seat for their careers. And then the other lane is teaching organizations how to truly have an authentically inclusive culture. So very exciting times for me in 2020.
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely need that focus now more than ever, right?
Indeed.
Or definitely in these times for sure. And there's been a lot of movement in this space, and it's great to see. It's great to see companies stepping up and either expanding their D&I, adding a D&I. Some of them are adding the E, so the DE and I. So lots of exciting changes during this time. So thank you for your contributions.
No problem.
So you mentioned, one of your lanes is empowering women. So why is it important for women of color to have a platform to use their voices?
Oh my gosh. Well, look at 2020. Why? Oh my goodness, because what an opportunity in 2020 and beyond. And even before that, I mean, traditionally, there have been a lot of women in the workplace. There's I believe it's over 51% or more women in the workplace globally. And a lot of them are women of color. And, we can see from books like Minda's book, The Memo, that there's a true opportunity for women of color to lean in and have the resources, the mentoring, the sponsorship, etc. I think it's a true opportunity for women of color to leverage different vehicles to get their voices heard. So if you're not being heard in corporate America, inside the walls, if you will, then go external. You could be a panelist, you could be a speaker, you could be a moderator. There are opportunities to get your voice heard. For me, I found my voice through a employee, if you will. I was leading a African Heritage Employees Resource Group for about 4 years. But I had been with the organization for a number of years before that, but I was really behind the scenes and I really wasn't comfortable using my voice. Once I started playing in that space, I started to really use my voice, and I discovered the power of using my voice when I was sitting at the table with the CEO talking about what the culture is like and what my opinion was. And I I didn't know what to do with that because that had never happened to me before. And I liked it. So I started to look for opportunities for my voice really to be heard and for me to build up that confidence to use it more for change.
Yes. And you know what? Very similar situation for me. So I'm also in a diversity and inclusion space. And I had created a panel for LGBTQ plus women of color and allies, providing them a platform for their voices. So my podcast is actually, it started as that panel back in 2017.
Mm.
And it's iterated multiple times, but exactly as you said, I did it, I moderated it. It was a platform for my voice. It was a platform for their voice. I did that same panel. Well, not the same exact, but it was a different theme each year. But I did it for 3 years. And then this year I decided, hey, I'm going to expand it to all women of color. And it's going to be a podcast. And now I'm able every week to give a different woman of color the opportunity to use her voice on a platform. So thank you for sharing that and the importance of it.
I love that. That's so
Yeah.
awesome.
So, other than you have two podcasts, I know that your one of your podcasts is a kind of like a school focused podcast. You mentioned the career, owning your career, and again, I love the podcast. My son goes to school, college, 90 minutes away. I'm often driving to listening to a couple of your episodes, as well as driving back listening to a couple episodes. And also when I was doing a lot of walking, exercising, I will listen to your podcast. So, those are two ways that you're using your voice. You mentioned some panels, you mentioned when you were in corporate, in the employee resource groups, but how else are you using your voice?
I use my voice in terms of the written word. So I write for entrepreneur.com and uh, I use my thought leadership across different platforms. So I've written for Glassdoor, LeaderCast, the AMA Playbook, Forbes, etc. If you are shy, introvert, and you've yet to build up those skills, you can use your voice in the written form. So I inform and educate through writing articles and sharing my message. I also am a speaker. I'm a professional speaker. So, pre-COVID, I was around the country sharing my knowledge at companies or conferences, sharing my message. So speaking is an opportunity to use your voice. Writing is an opportunity to use your voice as well.
Yes, and I'm glad that you mentioned that about the written word, because when I talk to people and when I say use your voice, use it however you can. And that could be speaking, that could be through writing, it could be, through drawing, dancing, singing. However, it's an expression. And that's kind of how I equate using your voice, expressing yourself. So, how are you expressing yourself? So, thank you for that. So there are some women of color who do not recognize the power of their voices. What would you like to tell those who perceive themselves to be voiceless?
I would tell them to go to a Toastmaster meeting. I remember, in my early corporate days, I'm an introvert. And so I very shy, and it took me a lot to speak up. I was the lurker and listening and processing. And I went to a Toastmasters meeting and I ended up staying in Toastmasters for about 10 years. Toastmasters is an opportunity to build your voice if you feel voiceless, because it allows you to learn how to speak extemporaneously as well as in the prepared form. And I think the muscles that you build from that experience can take you very far in life. So now you can do virtual. I've told my clients, some of my coaching clients, I'll send them to Toastmasters when we're working on building confidence, because I know the power of it from a leadership and from a communication standpoint. So I would say start there and, you know, get uncomfortable. Force yourself to dance with discomfort. It doesn't always have to be comfortable for you to grow. I have learned the most when I'm uncomfortable. So I would say find some, get into some good trouble and be uncomfortable, and you will find your voice, and be kind to yourself on the journey to finding your voice.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that. So get uncomfortable, right? I mean, growth comes from that. that space of being uncomfortable, from that space of discomfort. And I definitely like dance with discomfort. I want to kind of circle back to, so you mentioned you were having a conversation with the CEO, and you liked it. You like using your voice. You like how that experience was. Tell us a little bit more about that, because I think that a lot of us are finding ourselves in those spaces where we're with a CEO, with a leader, and right now, because it's 2020 and things that have happened, people are wanting to hear from us. So tell us a little bit more about that experience.
Yeah, I think you have to do some work on yourself to know what to ask for when you are being asked to use your voice or tell me your opinion. I think a lot of times I was in awe that I was invited into spaces that I could have used my voice even more, and I had to trust that my voice mattered. So I think prepare yourself for opportunities. Prepare yourself for when people say, well, how can I help you? Know what you need to ask for because you've given yourself time to think about it, and you have a running list of things that you need help with from senior leadership or your line manager. Be clear on what it is you need to succeed, whether it is a sponsor, whether it is dollars. And I had to convince myself that I remember having a $5,000 budget and having like major dreams about what I wanted to do in the ERG space. And I turned $5,000 into $80,000 because I got the
Awesome.
budget and I was like, okay, I don't really know what this is going to do for a year. I've got all these things I want to do. And so I learned how to write a proposal. I had a really good executive sponsor. He said, tell me what you want. And
Mm-hmm.
I learned how to use my voice in the written form. So I was writing out a proposal with, this is what I want to do, this is what it's going to cost, this is what I need to succeed. And then I had to be courageous to have the conversation with the executive sponsor, to hand it over to him, to trust him that he was going to do some magic with it. And guess what? He did. So you don't have to accept everything that you get. Like, that's it. At least try to push, try to dance with discomfort.
Yeah. And then the part about knowing what you want. Often we're like, oh, I want, you want something, you want that person's ear. But then when you have it, you're not able to communicate, articulate what it is that you want. So definitely have to get in touch with ourselves to understand what we want. And that is a level of discomfort. Whereas, often taking time with ourselves to get to know ourselves, to know what we want, that's an interesting experience. And I think is one that a lot of people kind of shy away from, but you have to tap into and get to know yourself. And I mean, and that's what you talk a lot about in owning your career, right?
Yeah, I talk about taking responsibility, and I full know about this because once upon a time I was of the mindset that folks owed me something and that I would
Mm-hmm.
just do my job and I would get my I would get my rewards. And so apart from pay, there were some disappointments for me along the way because I was busy waiting to be rewarded. And I notice others start noticing your environment and know the unwritten rules of your environment. I started noticing that people were networking, and I really believe that go into work, do your job, keep your personal life separate, and when it's time to go, go. And that's what I was doing, and I was thinking, why am I not getting promoted? Because
Mm-hmm.
I just did not understand the importance of networking and building relationships and being strategic. And I learned so much when I left corporate America that sometimes I'll say to myself, wow, if I knew this when I was in corporate, watch out. I wasn't there. And I think that God had a different plan for me. And this is my third try at entrepreneurship, and it seems to be working well this third time because I had to be convinced to use my voice in this way. So I just think we're each on a journey, and things become clearer with each experience that we have.
Absolutely. And what you were talking about reminded me of the one episode I had shared with you before, like, oh my God, I love listening to that, and it blew my mind, and it still does. So absolutely, there was a time when you could just put your head down and grind, and people would come and, oh, you're doing such a great job, here's a promotion. Those days are pretty much over,
Yep.
right? Those days are really over. Like, if they don't hear from you, they don't even know you exist. So
That's right.
so yeah. And so the one guest that you were speaking to, what I remember about her, you had asked her, when did she know, about her being confident or whatever. And she's like, I always was this way, right? There wasn't anything that really happened in my life for me to become this way. But what she also mentioned, which I grapple with, is she talked about how, and she was talking about the differences between men and women. And she said how men will go to the boss and find out, okay, there might be 10 different responsibilities within a particular role. Which two are you focused on? And that's the two that person is going to do, and they're going to do it well.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with us women, no, we're working on all 10.
Yes, yes, yes,
Right.
yes. Even the job description, I remember just ruling myself out based on my
Mm-hmm.
literal way of being. So if I see that I have only six of the qualifications, I wouldn't apply because I was like, well, I don't have these four things. And where from a gender standpoint, men are like, yeah, I've got this. Let me go ahead and go for it. And so
Right.
they're going for a lot more things. So but who teaches you this stuff? As I reflect back to my different educational stints in college, grad school, etc., like, where do you get taught this stuff? So you are having to learn some things on the job. Some people are lucky that they have influences around them where they've
Mm-hmm.
gotten the knowledge of, you need a sponsor in the workplace. No one
Mm-hmm.
ever told me about sponsorship. I
Nope.
did. I was like, I need a mentor, and it's a lot more than a mentor. You need someone who's
Absolutely.
going to put dollars, who's going to believe in you unequivocally, and really help you as a partner for success. I didn't learn a lot of that at home. I learned a lot in jobs that I've had or additional education, but I was struggling for a while, just trying to figure out it. Think about a Rubik's Cube, if you will. It's figuring it out, and you will figure it out.
Yes, for sure. And and you've already mentioned some of the places that add value or bring that value, being involved in an employee resource group, right? So whatever it's called at your company, if it's a business resource group, an employee group, etc., getting involved, because often they do career development. Like, they'll talk about the difference between having a mentor and a sponsor. You definitely need both. The mentor is more so just to kind of help you along with skilling up. Whereas that sponsor is like advocating for you, they're champion for you, they're talking about you, behind your back in a good way, right? They're in those closed doors speaking on your behalf. And so you learn that through relationships, building relationships. So however you're building those relationships, you're connecting with other people. And then you look at people who are doing things that you aspire to, and watch them, and or try to get a few minutes with them to learn from them. So yes to everything. Nowadays we have to teach ourselves. We have to learn for ourselves. Your podcast is a great podcast to help with that. Again, that's what it's about. Being in the driver's seat of your career. That's what you talk about on your podcast, and I thank you for that. It's been extremely helpful. So as we start to wrap up, I want you just to drop just a few lines about 2020. Like, when we first started talking, you said, look at 2020. And that's what I wrote down. And so look at it. Tell us more about, what is 2020 for you?
2020 has been a very pivotal year for me. I would say that 2020 has helped me to use my voice even more, because I had to use outrage in a productive way.
Mm,
And I was gutted by the killing of George Floyd. I was gutted. I had to decide how to use my feelings to move forward. And, I started off 2020 thinking that I was going to be really focused on empowering women to be in the driver's seat for their careers. I did this. I was really focused on the workshops and really molding or doing work in that space. And because the last thing that I did in March, before everything hit the fan, was I was at the Black Enterprise Women of Power conference. And what a wonderful conference. Oh my gosh. Ever get the opportunity, do go. I said to myself while I was there, why didn't I go to this when I was in corporate? Because I had no idea about this
Right.
conference that's been around for 15 years. And, you know, I'm like, why was this not on my radar? So I went to this conference and I came home, and you know, that's when everything hit the fan. I came home amped up about my career, about changing careers for my clients, and really going hard in that space for 2020. But I had to pivot with COVID because the world changed post March, post May. And so now I'm doing more of a dance with the inclusive leadership work. I still do career coaching, but I would say that primarily I'm getting a lot around the DEI strategy, listening sessions, etc. A lot around that work. So what 2020 has taught me is the ability to give myself grace, give myself space to deal with what happens in life, and and to rise up to handle what's next. So take the time to heal, take the time to strategize and plan and be in the driver's seat for your career, and you define what makes you happy. So I've had to do a lot of that in 2020. And you know, we don't know what is to come. We're about to you know, go towards election and what that means, and there's always something coming, but you have to learn to dance with discomfort in 2020 and beyond.
Absolutely. Simone E. Morris, I thank you so much for your voice. I thank you so much for what you're doing in the DEI space. And thank you for coming on an intimate conversation with women of color.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Deneen, for what you're doing and for allowing me this opportunity to come and dance with your listeners. Thank you so much.
You are welcome. Enjoy the rest of your
You
day.
too. Take good care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Goodbye. So, how was that? What another awesome, intimate conversation. As I mentioned, today's guest is one of my 3 favorite podcasters, someone that I looked to as I was thinking about starting a podcast. So I so appreciate Simone E. Morris. I appreciate her challenging us and preparing us, providing us tools with owning our career and getting in the driver's seats of our career, because it is up to us to manage that, to do the work that's needed to reach the goals that we're wanting to reach. So thank you all for being listeners. Thank you for coming back each week. I so appreciate you. Please continue to listen. Subscribe to the podcast if you have not already. And also important is to share the podcast. My goal is to reach millions of women. And in order to do that, I need your help in getting in front of them. So thank you again for being a listener. I so appreciate you. I am your host, Deneen L. Garrett.